Okay, a warm welcome to all participants to this webinar. It is a real pleasure to welcome you today to this event dedicated to the German foreign climate policy, fostering energy transition and combating climate change worldwide. It is a unique opportunity to come back to the study published by the IFRI-SERFA and drafted by Jeannette Zuys, dedicated to this topic. And it is also a pleasure to organize this event jointly with our friends of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, who are the natural partners to deal with this issue. A few words on this topic. I think it's a very important issue because Germany has positioned itself as a kind of pioneer on this issue by setting new norms and standards on the way to address climate change globally. Because with this strategy, Germany has innovated by trying to find an all-government approach and a very innovative interagency process in order to be able to tackle this issue jointly with all its available means, not only financial means, but also the know-how, and also by associating the industry and the different stakeholders in Germany. So only for this issue, it is worthwhile to try to see what is happening on this issue. And it's very important to have this kind of Franco-German debate on this point, because it could be an innovative way which could inspire other countries in their approach to tackle climate change. And without further delay, I would give the floor to my colleague Marc Berthold, the head of the Heinrich Böll Foundation in Paris.
Thank you very much, Eric-André. It's a pleasure to be with you all here today. Also welcome on behalf of the Heinrich Böll Foundation. I'm the director of the Paris office. The Heinrich Böll Foundation is the political foundation which is close but independent from the German Green Party. We are headquartered in Berlin. We have 35 offices around the world. One of them is here in Paris, and we work in France and in Italy. And one of our missions is to foster the dialogue between the French society, like today, and Germany, and among European partners. And of course, the combat of climate change is at core of our values and very dear to our heart. So we're very grateful to cooperate with SERFA and IFRI today. And congratulations, Jeannette, to the report. It's been hard work. So it's very good to discuss it today, the potentials that you describe, but also the challenges that we will certainly discuss. Eric-André already mentioned the role of this strategy for the German government, but it has also impact to really for all of us to learn what works and what really needs to be worked on. And we are very grateful to have Alexandra and Gaia to speak today and discuss it with Jeannette, and Sarah Champagne, my colleague here in the Paris office, will moderate the session. So without further ado, I hand it over to you, Sarah. Congratulations and have a good discussion, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and welcome everyone to this webinar. So I'll moderate the debate. The webinar will last 1 hour and a half, so we will have 1 hour approximately of study presentation by Jeannette, and then we'll have a debate between Gaia, who is an international policy coordinator at Cannes Climate Action Network, France. We also have with us Alexandra Goritz, who is a policy advisor for climate foreign policy at German Watch. And we have Jeannette Zuys, of course, who is the author of the study on German climate foreign policy. So I'm very happy to moderate this debate, and we'll then have 30 minutes for questions and answers. So please feel free to write your questions on the in the this section down on your screen, you can find this Q&A section where you can write your question, and we will take them at the end of the debate. So the webinar is also being recorded, so you can watch it later on. And then I can give the floor to Jeanne-Edzis for the presentation of your study on German climate foreign policy. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I'm very happy to have the possibility to present some of the main results of my study on the German foreign climate policy review today. I'm just technically grappling with how to do that because I don't see the presentation button anymore. So Barbara, if finally could do it for me, I would be very grateful for that because I don't know why, but it kind of disappeared. Barbara, you're there from the administration?
Oui.
Oui, tu peux le faire, s'il te plaît? Je sais pas, ça me l'affiche plus. 1 second, we're almost there. So as Eric André already pointed out, this topic has been very important for the German government, but the idea of our debate today is to broaden the discussion a bit and to see what are the complementarities also between France and Germany, but also in the EU context. However, I still don't see the presentation, but I think we're just about to be ready to go. Yeah, perfect. Okay, next slide. So I'm gonna jump right in. So actually, why talking about the strategy today? I think one of the most important things to say is that it's actually the first strategy that is that encompassing that has been released from a national government worldwide, actually, which integrates different aspects when it comes to dealing with climate change, but also on energy, of course, and other aspects I'm going to mention just in a second. Why Germany especially needs such a strategy? I think Germany, sometimes is a very complex country with different ministerial interests. So an interministerial coordination is really key when it comes in general to politics, but especially to this topic. We will see that it has a manifold of aspects that you have to bring under one umbrella. So the idea was really to get across these lines and bring the different interests of different ministries held by different political parties together. So as you know, we have a German government composed of 3 different political parties. So we have the Greens, we have the Social Democrats, and we have the Liberals, which is kind of a political experiment, so to say, right? So it's been the first time actually that Germany has a government composed of 3 parties. So this makes it even more complex. So there was really this clear need for an interministerial approach. And it was already set in the coalition government treaty back in 2021. So it took some time to get there, but the result is very interesting, and the strategy is really complex and encompassing, as I said. What we can see, however, although there's these 3 parties within the German government, is that the Greens played really a pivotal role here, because there has been a shift actually in terms of decision making. Before the Federal Foreign Office has not been involved that much when it came to the conceptualization of climate policy in Germany. There has been the so-called climate cabinet under Merkel, but then there was really like a shift since the Green came into power, and they're holding actually the Federal Foreign Ministry. For those of you that are not aware of that so far, and they established a role of the special envoy for climate negotiations with Jennifer Morgan, who is also one of the strongest advocates for this foreign climate policy. And they're also holding the Ministry for Economic Affairs with Vice Chancellor Robert Habeck. So they're really important actors when it comes to the implementation also of climate foreign policy. The strategy was presented on December 6th at the COP28 in Dubai. It's a bit ambivalent. Well, there has been criticism that on the one hand, that's a good momentum, of course, because climate negotiations have been ongoing. So it was a good moment to present the strategy. And on the other hand, it kind of got a bit outshadowed by these negotiations. So that's why we're also doing an event today to debate even further on that. The strategy, what is interesting as well, it's not only a strategy for Germany. It really tries to link the German endeavors to the European and more multilateral frameworks there is. Next slide, please. So the strategy actually contains 6 priorities. I'm not going to go through all of them, but what you can see is really it's a non-exhaustive list actually of issues addressed, and that's where you can see also that this interministerial approach is that much needed, because it includes issues that you would most probably think of, like mitigation and adaptation, like these are the more obvious ones, right? The whole discussion about loss and damage, but also about biodiversity, the restoration of ecological systems. But then we also have the reform of the climate financing system, and I think we're going to go back to that during our debate maybe. The question of risk management in the event of natural disasters, the question of social justice, and that's also very much linked to the global development goals, of course, and the energy transition in third countries, how to decarbonize industries, the health sector, education, research and development, as well as security and peace considerations on climate change. So as you can see, it's very, very broad. I don't think we're going to go through all these aspects today, but just to give you a quick overview of what it contains. Next slide, please. So these are the goals, but then there's instruments. So concretely, what does it mean? What can the German government do, or how can it translate its objectives into concrete policy outcomes? Well, there has been several instruments already at the disposal for the German government that have been established, or actors that are in place since years and years, but the strategy groups them and gives really like an overview of everything what is out there, but also strengthens some of the instruments, and then there's other instruments that came on top of that. So we have, for example, the embassies, which of course have already existed, but now there's really like a strengthened role of around 50 climate core embassies. That's how they call it in key countries all over the world. Then there's, and I think this is really, really important here, different type of climate and energy partnerships. So it's bilateral partnerships, but we also have multilateral partnerships. There's an instrument that Germany really put forward, especially during its presidency of the G7 in 2022, which is the Climate Club. It's kind of the pet project, if you like, of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who initially wanted to establish a carbon pricing mechanism, which kind of fails, and now is rather a project on how to decarbonize in industries in the most industrialized countries. Then what's interesting here also, and maybe to come back to the term like foreign climate policy, because in French we would rather talk about diplomatie climatique, and there is this term of climate diplomacy, but why are we talking about foreign climate policy? The idea is really to link actually foreign affairs to climate issues. So to incorporate climate considerations and energy transition considerations into foreign affairs, which are of course way broader than this. And then we have other instruments and key players like GIZ, which is a German development actor, right? Who also has been, of course, very active all these years. That's just strengthening its efforts when it comes to especially the setup of hydrogen worldwide, renewable energy promotion, also via the hydrogen offices in some countries worldwide, the financing, but also projects, for example, like in Morocco on desalination. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but just to mention a few of the key actors and instruments. Next slide, please. So as I said, partnerships are really key, and in the discussions there that have been existing already, where other actors from other countries commented on the German strategy, this was really like the key feature that has been pointed out, that partnerships are really key in this strategy, and that other countries also look at Germany. how Germany will foster these partnerships, what's the outcome, and what's the added value actually, to then have like a spillover effect, if you like, for the more multilateral and international negotiations that then take place also in the COP, of course. So the idea is that Germany tries to seek different type of partnerships. So on the one hand, you have the large emitters like China, USA, India, Indonesia. These are key players when it comes to combating climate change. And on the other hand, they're very ambitious, but they're also quite strict, or they don't. They have their very own position. So you can't convince them that easily, but you have to get them on board. Of course, they have a strong stance when it comes to their own policy and also their own needs, especially in industrialization for emerging countries like Indonesia, also India. Then you have the more vulnerable countries like Bangladesh or Pakistan, where it's all about supporting these countries, and it's rather a question of social justice. And then you have the multiplier effect countries. So these are countries who can be front runners in a certain region, like Brazil, for whole Latin America, or Kenya, who wants to become 100% renewable, for the African continent, or Fiji as a very small island who could disappear at some point. So it's really crucial to get these countries on board, to work together with them, and to create this multiplier effects so that other countries can be inspired actually by these partnerships. And then there's other partnerships which are rather multilateral, but Germany is very engaged in those. And the most important instrument here is definitely like the JET piece, so the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. That's what the acronym stands for. So far, we have 4 partnerships ongoing with Senegal, Vietnam, Indonesia, and South Africa, but there's other countries who might benefit from that. We might go back to that in our discussion later. It's a very complex process to set up. And on the other hand, it's very promising. But we don't have the data so far to really assess whether that's going to be a game changer or not. And last but not least, I think that's the last slide because I'm running out of time. What we did at IFRI is that we interviewed a lot of people working surrounding the German government and what they think of, and we tried to really get a sense of what are the challenges and the opportunities, not only about the strategy but about the broader issue of foreign climate policy. So of course, if the opportunities that we have to point out here is that it's a chance to combat climate change worldwide, next to the ongoing, of course, international negotiation processes at the COP, which is a very formalized process, right? So the idea is really to set up something new, a bit more tailor-made as well, because the partnerships are tailor-made. That's at least what the German government says. They don't want to do like a one-size-fits-all approach. So you can try to bring countries closer to you, and then once you align, to also get them going on the more formalized process, such as the COP. So that's also this enhancing negotiation power at COPs by bilateral initiatives. Fostering emergence of new technologies abroad. I mean, it's ideally in a mutual interest. So Germany, of course, as you know, is a very highly technological country. I'm going to get there. And has a high share of industry still, especially compared also to the other countries within the EU, with 24% of industry. So that has also a certain own interest to promote its technology for the elaboration of new renewables, for example, worldwide. But it also wants to help set up these new technologies in the context of a technological transfer in the third countries. But it also has to diversify actually its supply chain. So it's not only a question of willingness, it's a question of external constraints, especially since the war in Ukraine, as you know, with Russian gas, which has been called into question dramatically, and the need to find new provision for safe and renewable energy, actually. On the other hand, there's also this interest of increasing the electrification rate in third countries, especially in Africa, where still 600 million of households don't even have electricity. So we also have to think about that. The challenges, well, the German government highly bases its new strategy when it comes to the energy part of things on the development of green hydrogen. So not only in renewable energies, but especially green hydrogen. And we have to ask ourselves if that's a risky bet, because it's technologically speaking not evident. There's a lot of endeavors being taken, but from the pure technological side of things, but also from the financial point of view, we're absolutely not there yet. And there is a strategy specifically dedicated only on hydrogen, where we can see that a huge part of the needs for Germany's industry, as Germany is, for example, the biggest steel producer, has to be imported actually. So there could also be potentially a very high dependence, a new dependence on third countries. Then there's the question of the alignment with the EU framework, although, as I already said, the German government highlights at several points in the strategy that it's in alignment with the EU framework, with the Green Deal especially. There is no such external Green Deal diplomacy, if you like. It's not very formalized, so it's still there's still like a question mark to what extent the German initiatives and for example also the hydrogen policy is aligned with the EU framework. And I think there's a lot of things to do still. So this is actually a chance as well. It's not only a challenge for Germany to position itself within the EU, especially, of course, with France, to come up with a strategy for the externalization of the Green Deal. And then there's the question of credibility of domestic policy. So as Eric André pointed out at the beginning, Germany sees itself as a key player, as a pioneer when it comes to this foreign climate policy. But on the other hand, other third countries sometimes question Germany's role and credibility when it comes to its domestic energy transition, because it has very ambitious goals that it set itself, but it's not always reaching them. And still, although there is this common approach, this very encompassing approach, and it took a long time for all these ministries to bring that into one strategy, we can still see a certain lack of incoherence between ministries and the interministerial fights that have been going on. So it's not because we have this one strategy now on paper that everything is fine. We still have very vital discussions going on, especially on domestic politics, of course, especially between the Liberals and the Greens, but also sometimes between the Social Democrats and the Greens. So yeah, it remains captivating, and we have to see how this will go on until the next elections that are taking place in 2025. Thank you so much for your attention, and I think we're good to go. This was just a kickstart for our debate, right? So I'm going to hand over again to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Janet, for this very clear and concise presentation. If you're interested in the study, you can find it on the chat. I think IFRI Evenement sent it as a first message, so feel free to read it later on. And yeah, this raises a lot of questions about challenges and opportunities of this German climate foreign policy. So the next 45 minutes will be dedicated to our debate between Janet Zus, between Gaia from the Climate Action Network France, and Alexandra Goritz from German Watch. So I will start with Gaia. Gaia, can you tell us more maybe about your work on climate foreign policy at the Réseau Action Climat, and what can you think we can expect from for France and for the EU from this German foreign policy, and also for potential French climate foreign policy? What can you tell us?
Thank you very much. First of all, big bravo to Janet for your work around the German climate foreign policy. It's very interesting, and it's a source of inspiration for us. I have a big focus on the international negotiation, COP and big summit as a G7, G20, and other. And first of all, I noticed with big interest the inclusive approach to drawing up such a document, and the time taken for its construction, which involved the key minister, but also involved the civil society, non-governmental organization and a think tank. And I think it's really a key to be sure that you have like all the stakeholders involved, and you have a chance for a real implementation. So on the methodology, if one day France would like to develop his own diplomacy climatique, I will say it will be very interesting to use the same methodology, because that gives chance to have something very ambition for me. And like Germany, France is seeking to be a climate leader, and on the international stage is moving into usual arena as G7, G20, Copenhagen, or Petersburg dialogues or COP. Last example will be the meeting at the G7 about climate and energy, and we saw French pushing to have a date for the phase out of coal. And France is also seeking to create its own moments, as we saw last June with the summit on the new financial pact for people and the planet held in Paris, known as the 4P. And France is seeking to drive forward its own vision of reforming the financial architecture. And France used the work that she did during the June summits and launched some coalition during COP28, a task force on international tax with Kenya and Barbados, and also another coalition on debt review also with Colombia and Kenya. So if France develops a foreign climate policy, it could include also a financial part, and will have a focus on the reform of the financial architecture. And it can be relevant because the next COP, the COP29, will have a big focus on finance, because we have to negotiate the new collective quantifiable goal. So for sure, it will be great if France develops its own policy to have that in mind, and also work on the quality of the finance, because we present always France as a champion on the quantity of the finance, but on the quality, France has to do a lot of work, because a major party of its finance, it's not provided from a grant. So we need to work on that for sure. And on the energy parts, Macron during COP29 was the only one to present a plan to phase out coal, oil and gas. He presents some dates. We don't have any methodology behind these dates and how he would like to implement it to be sure it's just phase out and fair and equitable. But for sure, if France develop his own policy, we need to have more information on that. And as a Can France, we are really worried on our relationship with gas, and specifically liquefied natural gas from Russia and US, because we saw from the Ukraine war like more importation from Russia, but also from the US. And also France needs to align his economic policy with his climate engagement, specifically working on the support for some big measure as Total Energy that we have in France. And on hydrogen, because I saw in the German policy a lot of information around hydrogen. In France, you have to know that the strategy was officially announced in September 2020, and the update was put out to consultation last December, and we saw an opening the door for the green hydrogen importation for the first time. So I think there is an echo between the German strategy and so France opportunity for green hydrogen resource. And of course, every activities around climate will require finance. So we will be interested also to be sure that France is coherent on its finance announcement. For example, at the moment in G20, we have France supporting Brazil for a tax on the wealthiest, but at the national level, it's not the same. Also around international taxation, we saw this task force launch during the last COP with Kenya and Barbados, but we also would like to have France very constructive in the negotiation of the International Tax Convention. So I think it will be great to use the work of Germany to inspire France on the methodology, but also on the content, and to be sure that we have this coherence that we need to be sure France is still credible on the international scene. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this first input, Gaia. Please feel free, if you're in the public, to use the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen to ask questions you may have during this debate. I'll then hand over to Alexandra Goritz from German Watch. Alexandra, German Watch has had a key role in elaborating the German strategy. Maybe you can tell us more about your role exactly, and also your views on the strategy, what's in it, what you think might be missing, what can be the future steps for this strategy, and also if you want to react to what Gaia just said, feel free.
Thank you so much. And congratulations also from my side to Jeanette, of course, for the study. Super interesting and happy to see that it's out. And also interesting to hear for us the French perspective, actually, because we work a lot, of course, as you just said, on the German perspective, but it's super interesting to hear, since now we have this strategy, what kind of impact it also might have to neighboring countries, like within European Union, but also, of course, abroad. So I wanted to start maybe first by giving a little bit of the potential of the climate foreign policy, and also in the time now before the European election that we have, and then go a bit deeper into bilateral partnerships, and then also just a brief assessment from our side on the strategy. But Jeanette already did a great summary, so I don't want to repeat a lot of things that she said. On the potentials of the climate foreign policy, I think now, just before the European elections and also in the midst of all the crises that we're in, we have to see that climate foreign policy is really crucial in times of crisis. And we seem to be forgetting that, because in a time where people are super concerned about their security and their prosperity, and we see that the debates are becoming increasingly domestically focused. So this type of debate is being neglected, but we have to make clear that climate foreign policy is a central pillar for our prosperity, for our security. And so why do we need a climate foreign policy? And we have a very strong climate justice argument, and I think we should always put that forward, that Germany and the European Union, they have a strong historic responsibility to other countries to reduce their emissions as soon as possible and also support other countries. And actually, we're also unable to stay within our fair share of a global CO2 budget if we want to be 1.5 degree aligned without supporting other countries. And I think this has to become very clear. And this is actually a little bit missing in the strategy. We do talk about, or the strategy does talk about historic responsibility and justice, but I think this carbon budget is not mentioned at all in this in our strategy. But also beyond the climate justice perspective, when we look at it from a security perspective, if we want to build a more secure and a stable world, we need to decarbonize as quickly as possible, because in a world with an escalating climate crisis, which also multiplies other crises, it's just a massive security risk for the European Union and the European citizens, but also globally, of course. And to stay below 1.5 degrees, we need to reduce emissions as quickly as possible and as radically as possible. And therefore, we also need to support other countries bilaterally and multilaterally. And this is what this strategy also lays out. But then there's also an economic perspective to this, because we have a lot of anxiety about inflation right now, and there's a lot of economic anxiety in the European space. And here also we need to partner up with countries if we want to sustain our economic prosperity, because we cannot decarbonize ourselves, and we have to clearly decarbonize. And also we need to support our other countries in their decarbonization efforts. And we can become also economic partners with this endeavor. So these are other markets which are important also for European businesses. And then we have to decarbonize together because this is where the technology will be in the future. So we have many good arguments for a strong climate foreign policy, maybe just to set the scene in terms of also where we are now globally and now before the European elections. And one central instrument, as Jeanette already laid out, there are a couple of instruments in the strategy, are bilateral partnerships, are plurilateral partnerships, and Germany has a lot of them, to say the least. And there are over 50 of them, and they have to be coordinated well, and they have to follow a vision. We have, as Jeanette said, we have one ministry, the Economics and Climate Ministry, which is important to always emphasize. It's an Economics and Climate Ministry, so it's in the name of the ministry. They have energy and climate partnerships. They have the hydrogen partnerships with one goal, so to have an in-depth energy policy dialogue with on a government level with other countries and develop like jointly country-specific solutions. But then we have another ministry like the BMC, so the development ministry, which has like the climate and development partnerships. And there's a goal to support the developing countries and emerging economies in their endeavors to meet the Paris climate targets. Then we also have like critical raw material partnerships. We have a very different nature in their partnerships because this is about like securing the critical raw materials that Germany needs for their transformation, and to also diversify, as Jeanette said in her presentation, the supply chains. Some takeaways from the partnerships. We have to make clear that Germany speaks with one voice when it interacts with partners abroad. And I would be interested to hear also how the French side, for example, does that, because I guess it's very different from the German side where everything is a bit like spread around. So if we want to, like, for example, when we do investments in infrastructure, and we had like a big debate about it, for example, when our Chancellor Scholz went abroad and was very vocal about like wanting to invest in new fossil fuel infrastructure, for example, in Senegal, but at the same time, and wanting to announce a just energy transition partnership with Senegal, which then also came into place, which is about excluding actually fossil fuel infrastructure. So Germany has to be very aware of that. It spreads very mixed messages here, and that it has to be very aligned, and that not the chancellor can go out and say one thing and then the foreign ministry goes behind the chancellor and has to do something other. So better coordination and clear communication is super important. And I think also when it comes to German interest, the communication is very important. Because this, I think, has been neglected so far as well. And also in terms of like creating clear expectations for the partners. In terms of partnerships and how can they be like beneficial for both sides, I think we now said a little bit of things in terms of expectation management, etc. But for example, when it comes to critical raw materials partnerships and resource partnerships, it's super important to move away from the extractivist model of these partnerships and actually build partnerships that are economically mutually beneficial, and that also create value chains in partner countries. And this might also need to happen if the German like value chains might shift. So I think this is a very tricky debate that we are having now, also not only Germany and partner countries, but also whole of Europe and like other parts of the world. So I think this is very important to discuss. But also in others is partnerships, it's very much more about like linking the climate goals with the development objectives when we have like the development, the climate and development partnerships. So they're different focus there. And in general, we have a good step in the right direction in terms of like a more coordinated approach on the German side with the strategy, because Germany wants to assess its partnerships by the end of the year and actually then build upon that to make them more coherent and like see like how it wants to build on that strategically. So I think this is a super important process, and a process that we will watch very closely, and that we will hope that Germany then actually has some lessons to learn after its assessment. So I think this is also a positive thing as a concrete example of a thing that Germany wants to do. from its strategy. And to maybe say a little bit of a broad overview on the strategy, and a lot was said already. So the jointly developed approach is very important, and I think this is a massive step forward. It therefore applies across all ministries. So we hope that everyone can talk now with one voice. And as a result, also national ministerial priorities are now more closely linked with foreign policy instruments, and also foreign policy relevant topics can then be reflected in the domestic policy debates. That's the goal, at least. So we have to see how that will play out in the future. And as we also heard, this can also be a massive blueprint for other countries. So it was very important to have this kind of strategy. And now also Germany has to make sure that it's actually following up on that strategy, because this will serve as a role model for other countries. And on a general note, I think all important areas of climate policy action are set out, and there are also concrete priorities in each case. We have a new set of exchange between the state secretary level, which is new. And I think very important also that the coordination is not only done on like the working level in the ministry, but also actually on like a top political level, to have a more coherent approach here. And however, yeah, we haven't seen more than that. We expected a little bit more in terms of like how will the new structure be seen? And we haven't seen anything besides the new round of state secretaries that will be coordinating. And also we haven't seen an overarching plan of implementation and of the goals, actually. And another thing that we also like to see is to have kind of a regular assessment of the strategy. And it's a bit of a difficult time, since the strategy also took a long time to come through. And now next year we have already elections. So it's a bit difficult now to see, we're now in the phase of like, now we have the strategy, but now we need to see, and the government doesn't really have time to like implement everything. And yeah, in terms of evaluation, it will be interesting to see what they can do in the limited time that they actually have. And of course, we'd also like to see more civil society participation. There was participation in the process of the strategy, but also now it would be good to have that in a follow-up process, actually. And also international partners, to be honest, and not only like the German civil society, German industry, German businesses as it was, but also like from an international perspective. Maybe I'll stop here and happy to discuss further.
Thank you very much for this great review of challenges for Germany and its partners. Yes, Jeanette, if you want to add something based on your research.
Thanks so much, Alexandra. So as I had a limited amount of time, it was just really perfect to complete the overall picture of what this strategy entails. So thanks for that. Just on the responsibility side of things, because I think it's especially interesting for those who are not German and the public, maybe to get a sense of why is Germany doing that. So in general, there is this argument, of course, of social justice of industrialized countries that had their share or they had their time to industrialize themselves, but didn't really have to pay the bill in terms of climate repercussions, right? But it's I think especially interesting in the current context, also in a Franco-German comparison, because it's the extreme right that talks about that a lot, taking this argument of, well, but look at the emissions, France or Germany or European countries in general. Well, we only contribute, for example, for Germany, it's 2% of the greenhouse green emissions worldwide. So as such, you could say, okay, it's nothing. I mean, what's the point? It's not our task to deal with it. It's all about China and the US. But we have to take into consideration or bear in mind that especially countries like Germany, they are highly dependent on in their value chains on all the other countries, and these costs in terms of climate emissions, that these costs are not taken into consideration. So it externalizes a lot of its production worldwide, and these costs are not really accounted. So when you say, okay, you have 2% of emissions, it's not the whole picture. So I think that's really really interesting. And when you look at the CO2 emissions per capita, Germany is still comparable to China. So also this argument especially brought forward by AfD, so the extreme right party in Germany at the moment. Again, saying Germany is not the biggest emitter and we have to leave for the others dealing with that. It doesn't really, yeah, it's not really a true argument or a valid argument from my side. So just adding on the responsibility aspect.
Thank you for this precision. I think maybe in this second part of the debate, we could focus on the partnerships that Alexandra mentioned a lot, and also your views to all of you on the challenges, both on the ethical, on the economic, on the geopolitical side that these partnerships for Germany and maybe for other countries like France can entail. Maybe Gaia, if you want to also react to what Alexandra and Janet said.
On the coherence and the fact that we need to speak with one voice in France, we can see some difference between the minister, but also between the minister and l'Élysée in France. And also, maybe you are aware, but we had at the beginning of the year, a lot of change in our minister and the competence of the minister. So finance get the energy, and also the lead for COP is the foreign affairs now, and not the transition energy minister. So that makes some change in the power dynamic. And also, we will have election also in 2027. So if we had a strategy, we will have the same issue as you, like for the implementation. And it's the same in France with the extreme right using the argument of China and India. So I completely agree on the externalization and per capita arguments, but I will add also the fair share. And as a Can International, we developed some criteria for equity, fair share, and also we did the study for France, and I will share it in the chat to be sure we have the fair share of France on emission. But you can't just do on emission, you have to do also on finance. And on the partnership, France is always involved in the different JETPs that we saw. And I know there is some discussion at the G20 also to have more organized strategic JETPs. So we will learn more on that. And I'm sure France is very involved in the conversation. And I really appreciate, Janet, the presentation of the three type of partnership we did, and I saw Bangladesh and Pakistan for Germany, but know that for France also has a lot of focus on Bangladesh. During the COP20 night, Macron announced bilateral engagement specifically with Bangladesh on adaptation and loss and damage, and they put a lot of money in this partnership, more than in the loss and damage fund actually, because they like to choose which one country they want to work, and specifically take as a criteria the vulnerability of the country. So it's also important for us to see that France like to choose with which country they want to work. And also we saw a lot of discussion and exchange between Kenya, between Colombia. We saw like some alignment and some type of partnership. And I completely agree with you, Alexandra, that we need to go all this extractivist vision and be more in a win-win partnership. But I think France come with this historic, also colonial history, and maybe we have also to be more careful on that, and yeah, be aware of that.
Is that maybe, Alexandra, if you want to add something also in relation to the colonial past of France that is probably partly different from Germany, even if it also exists. Is there any different challenges for France and Germany you see there? And maybe also other ethical challenges that you can mention for these partnerships?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think although the history is maybe slightly different, I think the argument of colonialism or like neocolonialism comes up again. And I think it's important to rethink our partnership approach, like from like the beginning of the process on, and not only like on the goals, but also make sure that then civil society is actually heard. Because even if the government might be okay with specific things, civil society, which is on the ground, is not okay with specific things, and they are the ones that are then targeted by the action. So like adhering to specific environmental standards and social standards and including civil society in the process, I think is super important. But of course, I think there are also, I mean, to be quite frank, I think it's very difficult also for Germany and European countries, because we are also in a global competition, basically, in terms when it comes to partnerships, because it's not now that our partner countries are waiting for us for partnerships, especially depending on which kind of partnerships. And so we are in competition with other players such as China, such as the US. And so this is, I think, where we really have to make sure that we communicate well and clear, like what kind of benefits we can offer. And I think this is will be very important in the next time to make sure that we have strong partners. And I think these kind of partnerships are also crucial then for having multilateral kind of alliances, because this is kind of the basis where we can build upon in multilateral spheres. As we said, like, I mean, we want to have like bilateral partnerships that are that align well with the multilateral sphere, but also it can enhance the multilateral sphere. So I think we should always be aware of that.
Yes, please, Janet.
Yeah, just adding on the multilateral frameworks and partnerships to make it a bit more concrete, because sometimes for the audience might be very abstract what we're talking about when it comes to these partnerships. So we already mentioned the JET piece, the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. And as I said, there's only 4 countries so far, so that's not a lot compared to the over 50 partnerships Alexander mentioned that, for example, Germany has. What is really like one of the biggest challenges is really this acceptance issue of the overall society. And for example, if you take South Africa, which is the first JETP country that engaged in such a dialogue, 75% of the energy is still on fossil fuels and on the mining industry, and we're talking about 100,000 jobs. So around 10% of GDP. So it's tremendous. And these Just Energy Transition Partnerships, it's really the idea of decarbonize the industry. On the other hand, industrialized countries who are just about to industrialize even more. So of course, I mean, it's the same challenge with countries such as India, for example, where on the one hand, they see their chance of growing potential, and they're emerging countries, and on the other hand, there is this huge challenge of decarbonize their industries. But as we have seen with the South African example, because it's often seen as like the very positive example now, it could serve as a model for other countries. There has been a limited buy-in actually by civil society, and an increasing fear as well of all these people working in the industry. And I mean, we know that from Germany, so that's also interesting. Germany is also often considered an ideal partner because of the demining, the shift from its mining industry back in the days to a more green transition. But it's not, the exactly same discussion. And there's this international donor group, so this like consortium for the decision-making process within the JET piece. And of course, it's the Occidental countries being present there. So there's also the question of ownership, to what extent these countries can participate fairly in the debate, or whether there is like an approach or a partnership that is imposed and to these countries. And on the other hand, just a very quick remark on the colonialism debate. I do think, or that's at least what I got out of the interviews I conducted, is that there is more like a sense of carte blanche, like a very or a bit less of a problematic approach, especially when it comes, for example, to the African countries, when Germany tries to seek new partnerships, because there's not such a strong problematic history there is with France. So some countries might be more inclined or be more open to Germany. But on the other hand, that's also a huge challenge because there's not so embedded relationships existing so far, so we can't really rely on past experience. So it's also a bit of an experiment for Germany, how to foster these relationships with countries it has never really had so strong relationships in comparison to France, especially.
Great, thank you. I see Alexandra wants to add something, and also then Gaia, if you want to add something about the French position, feel free to do so, and then we'll have the Q&A session at the end of our webinar.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just one quick point on the JET-Peace and also on Germany as a partner, maybe. On the JET-Peace, I think we have seen a big political momentum around the JET-Peace, especially when it started in 2021 with the first one in South Africa. And then there was a lot of pressure to replicate them very fast in different countries. And now we have 4 of the JET-Peace. And I think now it's really time to make sure that the commitments or the announcements and the finance actually comes through, because now it's in a very risky state, actually. So I think now we have to make sure that these partnerships are delivered upon. And this is also where I think now it has to be more about like quality versus quantity. So we have like a lot of partnerships already bilaterally, as I said. Like we have the 4 JET-Peace, which is also like a massive endeavor, and with a lot of financial resources that are promised there. So, and now the financial resources actually have to flow to the partner countries. Otherwise, this will not be a successful like plurilateral partnership. And yeah, so I think now it's really the time to rethink how we can make these JET-Peace actually become successful, and including also civil society within those processes, because they were quite opaque in the beginning, and it was very difficult to be actually included in these kind of processes as civil society, especially also from JET-P countries, right? So what we also did is then like creating, for example, dialogues for JET-P country CSOs with the German government, actually, so that they got information. So just to make clear that this was not the perfect process, or like by far not a perfect process. And yeah, this has to maybe change. And a quick note also on Germany as a partner. And I guess I don't have the French counter perspective. So it's very interesting to hear actually for me with the carte blanche. And I think Germany is perceived more or less as a trustworthy partner also because it gives so much money in climate finance and development finance. And this is, I think, also where we are at a crossroads in Germany, because we have a massive budget struggle right now. And this is something where we have to be very, very clear that we need this climate finance. It's not only like development finance, it's not only climate finance, but we also need this if we want to have partners in the world. And this is something that is again neglected in the debate which is going on currently, and which is, yeah, we see that the development ministry's budgets are cut, so this will have an impact. And this is very concerning. So just to say, like, the perception of Germany might also change in the coming years. We hope not, and we try to, because there is also enough money, right? We have a lot of fossil fuel subsidies and etc. So we have a lot of things where we can like transfer the money in where it has to go. But just to say that this is also like we are at a crossroads now, which is very important now to consider with where Germany's position might change globally.
Can I add just 1 minute? Like on the JET-Peace, like the just parts need to be reminded. For example, we had a lot of conversation with friends, and they recognize that the just part in the JET-Peace needs to be better, and maybe dialogues will be great. And when I have a conversation with my colleague in South Africa, it doesn't see as a great process because of the inclusion of the civil society. And on the finance part, there is a lot of similarities with Germany and France. We are also seen as the champion, but as I mentioned, on the quality, we are really not the champion. And also we have a lot of cuts on our budgets. We saw that for the development, but we are very wary on the climate and also on biodiversity, because we see connection with climate and development, but also with biodiversity. And this year we will have COP climate, COP biodiversity, and COP desertification. So the need for the money is really there, and we have to be very careful on that and do some pressure as a civil society on France to be sure that she's still ambition on this side. Yeah. And subsidy is really a good way to reorient finance and also develop tax for sure.
Can I just add a quick comment?
Yes, please,
on what Alexander just said on the political side of things when it comes to German climate financing? I think what is interesting also, again, for those who are not extremely familiar with German policy and the current political composition, of the three parties that are in a coalition together. So it's really the struggle, especially between the liberals and the rest. So the finance ministry held by the liberals, where Christian Lindner actually said at the end of last year, I think I have a quote in my study where he says that it's a good thing, of course, that Germany is a big player in climate finance, but it would also be okay if we're not that, we still have to keep our first place in climate finance, but it's okay if we just lower a bit, So there's really this discussion with the also with the discussion on the debt brake, Schuldenbremse, how we call it in Germany, and the cuts that had been made. The question of whether we will have something like a new next generation EU program or a response at the EU level now going on as a response to the IRA, from the US. So this whole question of how we finance it internationally, but also how we can make the Green Deal a success story and not lose when it comes to competitivity. So I think these more like economical arguments that have to do with our own interests as a destination or as a region of competitiveness. This has come on the forefront of the discussion. And just the last point, in Germany we had a very polarized debate going on, especially last summer, and this has been kind of like the tipping point also from the Greens when it comes to their political support in society in general about the heating in Germany. So there's these domestic questions going on, which we also have to decouple from fossil fuels, actually. So there's more domestic debates kicking in, and this has repercussions then on the international forum. At least that's what we can see in Germany. So I don't know if there's differences when it comes to the overall perception of this in France, because from what I get on the debate on the European elections at the moment is that the Green Deal is also very much questioned. So this overall idea of investing in other countries and helping them decarbonize, so on and so far, is a bit questioned by these internal discussions, be it at the national or also in the European context.
Gaia, if you want to respond to this question about France before we
have a lot of similarity. It's the same for France, and also my colleague who is focused on EU try also to be in the defense of the Green Deal, specifically in the vision of the strategy of the EU, but also the next NDC. And we also have the same argument on the partnership. Maybe we can continue the conversation after the webinar on that.
It'd be a good opportunity to see each other in person. Thank you very much to the three of you for this brilliant analysis and discussions. We do have a few questions on the Q&A section, so I suggest we move on to this now. My first question is a more general one, is about the Franco-German aspect of this policy. So I'll just read the question to you, and then you can choose who is going to answer it, if it's okay. The question is, what's the content of the partnership, if any, of Germany and France on this topic? Who wants to go on? Maybe Jeanette, yeah.
I can start, but I'm sure Alexander might add up on this when it comes to the jet piece, maybe. So there's no specific mention on the Franco-German partnership, Franco-German tandem, however you call it, although in other strategies that Germany has come up with, because that's also something I didn't say. There's a lot of strategies actually that came up. So there's a China strategy and strategy on national security and the hydrogen strategy. So this government, I don't know if there has been already so many strategies before. It's really at the forefront when it comes to elaborating strategies, and now it's about implementing them. But at least on paper, the Franco-German dimension is not explicitly mentioned. But for once, although I work at the study committee on Franco-German and relationship, of course, normally we always say there has to be a Franco-German moment. But I'm not sure if that's so much needed. So I think it's even more crucial to align that with the European framework, and of course, therefore, a Franco-German dialogue upfront is needed, and to align it then, within the EU context. But I think the EU is the more appropriate actor here when it comes to, as I already said in my presentation, the external aspects of the Green Deal. However, France and Germany play already a key role when it comes to the setup of the Just Energy Transition partnerships, because they're both active in these partnerships.
Who wants to add something on the question? Alexandra or Gaia, maybe?
Maybe I can jump in real quickly. Yes, so as Janet said, there is no specific around like Germany and France in the strategy, because it is more outward looking. It is more not Germany's strategy towards European partners, but like abroad. And of course, they have to have a European approach, as Jeanette just said. There is this group of friends on the European level with Germany and France and Denmark around ambitious climate diplomacy, I think, which is an important vehicle and should, be a key group for pushing for more ambitious climate diplomacy. But I know that also, and is another team of ours, but there is also colleagues of mine working specifically more on a green Weimar triangle. So like it's more about like the cooperation between France, Germany, and Poland in this regard. So this is like on the European level. So there are things going on, I think, which are very interesting and important on this level. But as I said, like I think it's a different level. And I think on the JETP, like the Senegal one is very much driven by France and Germany together. They are the key, because normally with the JETP there are always two states of the International Partners Group which lead the ones. And for Senegal, it is Germany and France who are leading that one.
And if I can add, for me, it's also an opportunity to press on the ego of France, to say, so Germany did that. It's very interesting. Maybe it will be great for you also to develop your own strategy, or maybe to be more public on your strategy, because I'm sure there is one, but the need to have a documents and be public and work on it and be inclusive, it's also an opportunity for me. And on the Senegal JETP, yes, France was very involved and also announced the JETP during the June summit. It was really important for them to have this announcement at this moment. Yeah, for sure.
Great, thank you. There are two more detailed questions then about the German climate diplomacy. One of them is, does this German climate diplomacy resemble on a more modest scale what the USA and China have been doing for several years with the same observations? The energy transition is one of the main issues of international competition and rivalry, and the multilateral negotiating framework at the UN is inadequate. So that's the first question. And then a second question from the same person is, are there connections with initiatives like Global Gateway? I leave the floor to you.
So maybe just very quickly on the Global Gateway aspect, it's mentioned in the strategy 2 times actually, but it's just mentioned. So the German government says, it wants to support these type of initiatives. But again, as also already Alexander pointed out, often there's these sentences, we want to support, but you don't really know what does it mean, does it come down to very concretely speaking. But yeah, thanks for this question, to mention that at the EU level, Alexander already mentioned also the Group of Friends, which is one of the only existing institutional arrangements we have so far when it comes to the external aspect of the Green Deal or the Green Deal diplomacy. But the Global Gateway projects are another very important aspect. But I think that's something typical for the EU, where you don't really have a proper governance, but you just start with projects somewhere to see how it goes. Although there's not, overarching institutional arrangement so far. But yeah, so it's mentioned on the other aspects. I might let the other panelists maybe respond.
Yeah, I might just start. And maybe on the Global Gateway, I think the Global Gateway is such a big umbrella that a lot of things fall under it. And I think the JETPs also fall under it, like Team Europe approaches fall under that. So I think there is a connection to Global Gateway, but I'm not sure how strategically it is made, or it's like, okay, this all just looks fine and it can go under Global Gateway. So I think it's more about like making sure that the German strategy now is clearly interlinked with the European strategy. And I think this kind of vision on the European level is missing for the external dimension of the Green Deal. And yeah, so I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And in terms of the other question, I think generally, yes, in terms of like the multilateral framework, and I think we mentioned that already. So it's not that we don't need the multilateral framework, so not at all, but in general, Germany needs to have a coherent approach, also bilaterally, but also multilaterally. So I think this is rather not only thinking in like a multilateral way and bilateral way, but bringing this all together actually. And energy transition, I think definitely there is a part of like rivalry and competition. I don't think we can say that there is no competition when it comes to like critical raw materials, etc. kind of things. So I think there is a big like green hydrogen. There will be a massive question. Jeanette pointed it out, and Gaia as well. So yeah, definitely, I think this is going in this direction, but not to say that like multilateral negotiations are not needed anymore, but definitely more is needed to support them as well and complement them.
Thank you very much. Gaia, do you want to add something about this question? Or we have one last question that's a bit specific. I'm not sure any one of you can answer to it. It's about Bangladesh, Germany's partnerships in Bangladesh. And do you know anything about this in terms of energy transition? And if not, I suggest we can also jump to the question of hydrogen, which was very specific, especially green hydrogen, and what are the challenges linked to it in terms both of ethical aspects, but also economic, as it costs a lot of money. So anyone wants to jump into one of the other aspects?
Sure, maybe as a starting point again, because there was this question of what type of partnerships we have, and we have been talking a lot about the JETP, so that's one thing. And then Alexander mentioned the more like climate and development partnerships, and that's also the case with countries of Bangladesh, where of course the development aspect is also very important, but also the question of adaptation, of course. Or we have countries such as Brazil, where it's all about how to avoid further deforestation, But when it comes to the hydrogen partnerships, that's partnerships that have been already going on for quite some time before the new German government took office in 2021. So you can also see a certain path dependency, so to say. And it's process that has been steered, especially by the economic ministry, which was under CDU, so the Christian Democrats dominance. So there has been a huge shift when it comes to political responsibility and the ideology behind that, of course, because as you can imagine, CDU is known for being very pro-business. And the Greens may be a bit less. So there is, if you like, a reshuffle of the logic of such partnerships. And on the other hand, this need to align those who have already been existing. So that's where the incoherence comes from sometimes. And just to give a first idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about green hydrogen, the estimations at the moment for Germany's need to decarbonize its industry, as I said, it still has 24% of its GDP, which comes from the industry. That it's really a tremendous compared to a country like France, which has 12.5, I think. So it's way more. There's estimates going from 95 to 130 terawatts per hour. And it's said that it's around 50 to 70% of this need of hydrogen that might come from imports. So 50 to 70% of the energy needs might depend on third countries. And that's all the question at the moment, whether if Germany wants to maintain its goal to be climate neutral by 2045, so 5 years even before the EU objective, going to maintain this agenda, because what we can see already at the domestic level, Germany wants to have to produce 10 gigawatts of hydrogen by 2030 by itself. I think France is 6.5, but it's of course smaller. It doesn't have the same share and the same amount of industry as I just said. But we're already lagging behind. So the technological aspects, the financial aspects, the logistical aspects, especially how to transport this from other countries worldwide who are very far away. That's really a crucial element here. There is a lot of research going on, a lot of projects going on. So there's a lot of chances and opportunities. Of course, I don't want to minimize that, but it's really a question mark whether Germany will get there actually.
Maybe Gaia or Alexandra wants to add something about the hydrogen question. And then we'll have one last question maybe from the public that just appeared. I can also read it to you and then you can choose how you respond to both these questions. It's about the externalization of the Green Deal. And if you envision this as a potential lever, and what's the idea developed behind this strategy? So more information about this externalization of the Green Deal. I suggest you respond to these two questions, and then we will slowly come to an end of the webinar. Yes, please.
Yeah, maybe I can start. Maybe also just from the hydrogen perspective, I think Jeanette mentioned a lot of important things from the European perspective as well. But I think also when we engage in these like kind of hydrogen exports and partnerships, it's also important to think about again like the partnership perspective and what does it mean to have this kind of partnership. What will happen to like water resources, energy resources? It will, as we've seen, like a lot of countries that we talk about, like in terms of hydrogen, for example, Namibia, we have to think also about like local energy access, and are we actually taking away from like local populations in terms of energy access? Are we taking away from local population in terms of water resources, etc.? So I think there's also like this dimension in terms of when we talk about hydrogen. And on the other question, I think it's the Global Europe instrument, right? And I think this is also supposed to be part of the Global Gateway instrument and falls under it and has like a couple of like billions until like 2017 and a bit of a different focus, I think, like in terms of like peace, stability, and eradicating poverty, promoting sustainable development. So I think definitely this is also like an important instrument, but again, I think it's important to get them aligned and make sure also to partner countries, like who is doing what and what is responsible for what. I think this is also like a lot of like translation and communication work, because a lot of partners also just don't understand like the offers from the European Union is what we've heard. And I think this is just important to be like, instead of like making a new instrument that is maybe understood within the EU, but also maybe not even that. We have to also make sure to communicate this externally. So I think always coming back to this external and partner dimension and perspective, I think is very important. But yes, definitely.
I put in the chat the goal of France on hydrogen, but you have to have in mind that we are talking about green hydrogen, but soon we will start to discuss about the pink hydrogen in France connect to nuclear, in my point of view. So as a civil society, we will have to be careful that we are not in this extractive mindset and the risk on the resources for the partners, and also in France the connection with the nuclear for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maybe Jeanette,
maybe just a last remark on the
exactly
on the hydrogen from Franco-German point of view. What I found interesting, I mean, I'm not a specialist in hydrogen, right? But I had a look at what's the ongoing discussion in France, and I do see a huge difference actually when it comes to this partnership approach, because as I said, Germany is really highly dependent, or proactively chooses to be potentially dependent on these countries, whereas in France, so far, the discussion is very much channeled about how to become a European champion. I mean, they all want to be champions, actually. So Germany already declared itself a potential champion by 2030 in the development of hydrogen technologies. France did the same, I think, also in 2021. So again, when the Christian Democrats were in place, but I think the level of ambition hasn't changed that much. And on the other hand, they want to become European champions. So there is way more discussion, at least that's how I perceive it from a German perspective, on how to level up the engagement within the EU, how to set up corridors when it comes to the hydrogen infrastructure. But of course, the discussion is a bit different because France has better possibilities actually to promote hydrogen on site, whereas Germany doesn't have these raw materials or the existence of what you need to produce hydrogen. So it's another discussion. But now with the renewal of the new hydrogen strategy that is just about to be published, there's also the discussion whether there might be more imports needed also for France and the EU. So I think there might be a potential alignment between France and Germany here, to put it that way, for the upcoming years.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think now we can close this webinar. I really encourage you to read the study by Jeanette Sus. It's in the chat as the first message. Maybe we can repost it, but we can find it on the IFRI website anyway. And if you are interested in more events on the subject of climate policy or foreign policy, also both, or other topics linked to the ecological transition, Heinrich Böll Foundation and also SERFA have a lot of webinars and conferences and other events that you can check on our respective websites. So feel free to do it. And I thank especially our three guests here, Gaia, Jeanette, and Alexandra, for their really great and insightful input. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I wish you all a good day. And thank you very much.
And thanks, Sarah, for the animation. It was really great to be with all of you.
Thank you so much also from my side.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.